Welcome to Anatomy and Physiology, and welcome to Chapter 1. We are using our OpenStax textbook. So this is our free textbook. These PowerPoint slides actually came from OpenStax. I've modified them relatively a lot because I want to add my own little frill into the mix. So Chapter 1 is all about what is anatomy, what is physiology, how are they related. We'll talk about some divisions of anatomy and physiology. Then we're going to talk about the human body, since it is all about the human body. But we're going to talk about characteristics associated with living humans. So not dead humans, sorry. Then we're going to get into terminology used in anatomy and physiology and why it's so important. And we'll finally get into the different mechanisms for looking inside the human body without dissections. Okay? So the first thing, any image that isn't from your textbook, I have a little disclaimer down here, found on Google Images. I find them on Google Images. I like them, and so I use them. And so I have my disclaimer here telling you that that's where these came from. So this is from Google Images. Anatomy is the study of the structure of the human body. So when you're looking at the skin, when you're looking at hair, when you're looking at a heart or the muscles of the body, that's all anatomy. And anatomy instructors, anatomists, they typically are looking at how the structures fit together, what structures make up individual organs. Whereas physiology functions or examines how the body structures function. So if you're a physiologist, you might be looking at how organs function together. Not so much what are they composed of, but what are they doing. And so over here, what I did was I found this cool image of the digestive system. And it shows the mouth here. It goes down through the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach. We've got the large or small intestines, and then we have the large intestine. We have a lot of different accessory glands, like our salivary glands. We have liver. We have our gallbladder right there. We have our pancreas. Those are all parts of the digestive system. We also have a tongue and teeth. And if you're studying anatomy, you might be looking at all of these structures, what they're composed of, how do they fit together. If you're a physiologist, then you might be looking at this entire structure differently. Instead of seeing the mouth, you might see digestion occurring in the mouth. You might see peristaltic waves moving materials down. You might see churning in the stomach, more digestion of materials, breaking down the materials further and further. In the small intestines, you might see absorption, you might see secretion. But what you're not going to really be focusing on is what do the structures look like? What are the structures composed of? Because that's what an anatomy person looks at, okay? There are different divisions in both anatomy and physiology. I typically will go through the anatomy side, but in the physiology side, there's the same types of divisions. So you can study in anatomy, microscopic anatomy. Microscopic anatomy examines things that are too small to be seen by the aided eye, by the unaided eye. So if you can't see it with your eyeballs, then it's going to be microscopic anatomy. Cells and tissues are typically part of that microscopic anatomy. And when we get into our histology chapter, we'll be looking at tissues under the microscope. So cytology is the study of cells that make up the body. Histology is the study of the tissues that are composed of all of those cells. And this is a figure here, or an image of neurons. So there's a neuron, there's a neuron. All these little tiny cells outside are neuroglial cells. This structure itself would be then a tissue. On this side, we have a macroscopic structure, so I'll talk about that in a second. Macroscopic anatomy then considers large structures that are able to be seen by our eyeballs. So our brain is an example of a macroscopic structure. Our skin, all of those large organs, bones, those are all macroscopic. So we could study gross anatomy here. Under gross anatomy, we can oftentimes focus either as a systemic study or as a regional study. So when in our class, Anatomy and Physiology here at Spoon, we do systemic anatomy and physiology. Now, if you go into upper level anatomy classes, you typically will look at regional anatomy and physiology. So regional anatomy and physiology is where you're looking at a specific region of the body and you learn all the structures and their functions of that one region. So here would be a regional anatomy of the tarsal region. And then over here, this is how we study. This is the systemic anatomy of the endocrine system. So we will look at all of the endocrine organs in all regions of the body and then how they function. And most lower level anatomy and physiology classes do systemic anatomy and physiology. We could also do comparative anatomy. So comparative anatomy, and in our class we do this all the time. Comparative anatomy compares different organisms. So here we have the forearm of 5 different animals: the human, the dog, the pig, the sheep, and the horse. And if you look, we're very similar. We all have that scapular bone. We all have this large upper arm bone called the humerus. We have 2 lower arm bones called the ulna and radius in each case. And then down here we have some metacarpals and carpals. Depending on the organism, will determine how they're put together and how many metacarpals and carpals you have. We do comparative anatomy, though, all the time because you can't dissect humans easily. So, first of all, to get a cadaver is a huge undertaking. Cadavers are hard to get, and they take a lot of work to keep and preserve. Because of this, we use other organisms like rats or pigs. That's typically what I use. Other schools will use cats, and some others might use other animals that are similar to humans. I use pigs because most people are less disturbed by dissecting a pig than they are a cat. More people have cats as pets. And pigs are more like us. Cats are carnivores. We are omnivores. So, we're a little bit more like a pig than we are like a dog. So looking at the pig anatomy is a little bit more beneficial. And then rats are very small. They're also omnivores. And they're a really nice organism for a first dissection. Because some of you may never have dissected, I always like to throw that first dissection in AMP1. Embryology then studies developmental changes that start at conception. So here we have this neural tube forming before most women even realize they are pregnant. And here at 50 days, we have our nice large forebrain that's going to be the cerebrum. We have this region called the diencephalon that's going to form into the diencephalon, I should say. We have this lower region, oh, sorry, I was clicking instead, which will form the hindbrain. It's going to have the pons and the medulla oblongata. Here's your spinal cord, and this little structure right here is going to be that cerebellum at some point once it forms fully. And so here's at 100 days, even looking more like the human brain, and here at 9 months, that perfect, beautiful human brain that we have. More specialized branches of anatomy. You can specialize in pathology. So pathology would be looking at the structure of a healthy organ and then how it changes during disease. Or radiographic anatomy, internal structures we can look at without dissection. And so here is pathologic anatomy. Here we have healthy legs, and here is a very unhealthy leg. So this leg has necrotizing fasciitis, which is more commonly known as flesh-eating disease. So there's staph or clostridium or something got into a small opening on this foot, on this leg, and started basically breaking down the tissues between the skin and the muscles, causing the skin to slough off. Very painful and interesting for those who are interested in pathologies. And here we have bones that are broken. So this is a figure that both the femur and the tibia and fibula are both broken, actually on both legs, which would be horrible. I couldn't even imagine how that could happen, but I mean, I'm sure it has. Well, obviously it has. And here are the healthy legs, so you can compare those and determine, you know, what is going on. In physiology, we can focus on a specific organ system, and that's typically what physiologists do. They look at one, or they specialize in one major organ system. Neurophysiology is going to study the nervous system. They will know how a normally function nervous system works, and then when there's disease, they can kind of see the difference between that normal function and then what's going on with Alzheimer's patients or with Parkinson's patients. So taking anatomy and physiology and putting them together, you can see how important they are. Here is a figure from your textbook that shows a medical person, can't tell you what type, doing a blood pressure. Knowing anatomy and physiology is going to be very important in any medical profession. And the majority of you, wow, can I speak today? The majority of you are likely going into a medical career. I have very few students who take my class as just a fun class to take. Most students, no, 99% of my students take it because they're going into nursing, dental hygiene, or some other medical area. And that's good. It's good. This is like the fundamental part of your career choice. So you have to get that good foundation so that you can then go on and really understand what you're doing in your career field. And so think about, you know, how is anatomy associated with the blood pressure? How is physiology associated with the blood pressure? And if you aren't sure, come to class and bring me that question and we can discuss it as a group, okay? So now let's look at why I teach and why almost, I would say, at least 75% of Illinois colleges teach anatomy and physiology together. We don't teach anatomy one semester and physiology the next. Some do. So I said about 75%. Most of us teach anatomy and physiology together because they are inseparable. The structure of the organ is going to determine the function of that organ. So think about it. If a structure doesn't look right, it typically doesn't function right. When you are driving on a road and you have a flat tire, the structure of that tire changes and the tire no longer functions properly. Here we see this cart with square tires. Similar concept. The tires are misshapen, and so they're not going to function properly. If we add the proper shape, now it's going to be much easier to pull or push this cart. Same thing with the human body. If the structure is proper, then the function works. If you take a straw and you try to suck out of a straw, and there are lots of holes all throughout that straw is not going to pull the fluid from your drink into your mouth. But if that straw is structured properly, then you're going to be able to drink like you're supposed to. Make sense? And I do hope you understand this, because this is something that I drive into your brains. So I wrote the words in bright red. Structure determines function. It's something I want you to get. I want you to take with you. I want you to repeat it. I want you to memorize that term, those 3 words, and I want you to use it as your mantra. Just structure determines function. Structure determines function. Structure determines function. And, you know, maybe it'll help you relax too. Who knows? Okay. So now we're going to jump into the next section, which is the levels of organization of the human body. So all living things are organized, and that includes humans. We start off at that at atomic or chemical level. So atoms are the smallest units that take up space and have weight. So they have mass. Atoms come together producing molecules or chemicals. So oxygen gas, water, stuff like that are our molecules, okay? When molecules come together, they form large macromolecules like proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, fats. And these different macromolecules come together forming cells. The cell is the basic unit of life. It is the first, the smallest unit that is considered living. Everything below the cell is not considered living. Proteins are not living. But the cell is a living structure. So then cells come together forming tissues. When you have the same type of cell coming together, they form these tissues. And tissues can come together, tissues that have the same idea of a job can come together forming our organs. So here we have a bladder. Bladder is composed of epithelial tissue as well as muscular tissue. There's going to be some connective tissue here as well. And then these organs can come together. So here we have the bladder. Here you see these little tiny structures. Those are called ureters going into the bladder. Up here, there are the kidneys. And way down here, you don't really see it well, but you have a urethra. Those are the structures that make up your organ system called the urinary system. And when you get all different organ systems coming together to function, then you have that organismal level, and the human is the organismal level. We are composed of 11 different organ systems. So let's look at those different organ systems. And we're actually going to not only look at them, but I'll tell you which ones we'll cover this semester and which ones we'll be looking at next semester. There's a lot of information that we go over in the first semester prior to getting to that tissue level or to that organ system level. And so we don't go through as many organ systems in the first semester. So we're going to go through the integumentary system. The integumentary system is our first organ system that you come in contact with. It's that dry membrane, including the skin, the dry membrane, hair, nails. There's a lot of accessory organs that you don't see, like sweat glands. The integumentary system functions in protection, so it's the first line of defense, but it also functions in vitamin D production. It functions in maintaining body temperature. So it has a lot of different functions, and we'll talk about those different functions. I just gave you 3 here. We're going to go through the skeletal system. The skeletal system includes your bones, and the joints that allow your body to move. So joints, movable joints like your synovial joints, are how we are able to move. And so we're going to cover the skeletal system this semester as well. I believe those are chapters 6 through 9. So there's a lot of chapters, but it's not that bad, so don't stress over it. The skeletal system functions in maintaining body structure and protection. It also helps in storage of specific nutrients. We'll cover the muscular system. When we talk about the muscular system, we focus on skeletal muscle. There are 2 other types of muscles that we will mention in the muscular system, and that's the cardiac and the smooth muscle, but we will focus on our skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, or all muscle, functions in movement, but it has a secondary function of producing ATP, producing heat energy from the conversion of ATP into movement. And then we will finish up our semester going over the nervous system. Nervous system is broken down into 2 major regions. We have the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. This is your primary messenger system that takes information in and determines what has to be done. And then we have the peripheral nervous system that picks up the stimuli, sends them to the brain, and receives the information from the brain so that they can bring about change that has to occur from what that central system determines we have to do. The next semester, and so this should be in the fall of 2019, is when you'll take AMP2. We will cover the endocrine system, which is your second messenger system. It's a slower acting messenger system, but it's a very important system. It's what maintains or what controls growth, development, puberty, reproduction, your metabolism. So it's a very important organ system. The cardiovascular system, which includes our blood vessels, and our heart, is the organ system that transports materials throughout our body, takes nutrients to our cells, takes waste products away from our cells, and maintains oxygen levels in our body. Then we have the lymphatic system. Lymphatic system is composed of different lymphatic organs, including our lymph nodes, our thymus, our spleen, lymphatic vessels. And its function is to harbor your lymphocytes, help in producing new lymphocytes, and providing specific immunity to our body. Respiratory system, composed of our lungs, our nasal cavity, our pharynx, our trachea, larynx, functions in getting oxygen to our cells and getting rid of waste products. It has a lot of other functions, but that's the major function that it does, is it takes in oxygen, and the reason we use oxygen is to produce energy, ATP. Then we have our digestive system. Digestive system is composed of our mouth, our pharynx, our esophagus, stomach, small and large intestines. We have an appendix as a vestigial structure. We have a liver, pancreas. We have salivary glands, our tongue, our teeth are all accessory organs. And the digestive system functions to take in nutrients so that we can use them to produce energy or build up other materials. Urinary system, this is your system including your kidneys, ureters, bladder, and urethra. Super small organ system, very easy to memorize all the structures. And they're all macroscopic, so it's nice and easy to see everything. Urinary system functions in getting rid of nitrogenous wastes, but it also helps in maintaining blood pressure levels, keeping water balance in the body. So it has a lot of important functions. Then we have reproductive system. That's our last organ system. The reproductive system is composed of testicles, the vas deferens, the seminal vesicles, the urethra for the males. It has accessory organs, including your prostate, bulbourethral gland. In females, we have the ovaries, fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the vaginal canal. The major function is to produce sex cells that can eventually come together, forming a zygote. The zygote is a unique single-celled organism that eventually will undergo multiple mitotic divisions and become a new human that is genetically different from both mom and dad. All right, I'm going to stop on this lecture and I'll start a new lecture. I figure 27 minutes is long enough to listen to me talk at one time. Probably most of you took a break in between, which is totally fine. I'm going to go into the next lecture section, and I'll post this one to YouTube so you can watch it, okay? All right, bye.